Where there is discord, may we bring harmony. Where there is error, may we bring truth. Where there is doubt, may we bring faith. And where there is despair, may we bring hope.
Margaret ended our first meeting by telling me we must stand together. And that's exactly what we've done.
Baroness Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister of Great Britain, friend of Ronald Reagan, friend to the U.S., dead today at the age of 87 of a stroke. Her life and legacy. We're back with the panel. Charles.
I think she has a two-line epitaph. She single-handedly saved her country from socialism, and together with just a few others, including Reagan, she helped to bury communism forever, which we don't remember, but was for a century the dominant ideology in the world. At home, she was amazing. She faced down the Union that even her party, the Tories, had given up on taming. She undid the sclerotic bureaucracy that she had inherited by selling off all the things that Labor had nationalized and selling them off in a way, including council housing, that would make stakeholders, ordinary citizens, stakeholders in the firms that she had denationalized, and stakeholders in their own homes. And lastly, she sort of changed the zeitgeist of a country that had imagined that its decline and sclerosis were a result of history, exhaustion by the end of the two world wars, and not policy. And in that way, she, like Reagan, changed the ideological trajectory of her country, and we learned how true that was when their successor in Labor upheld all of her principles and policies.
Britain's only female prime minister. She was, Mara, a character. She had some great phrases that were just
great phrases,
iconic. I like. Let me call up another one here, where she addressed folks. Take a listen to this.
To those waiting with bated breath for that favorite media catchphrase, the U-turn, I have only one thing to say. You turn if you want to. The ladies not for turning.
That is a real classic, and I had never heard that one before, but that is incredible. She was a character. She was absolutely made of steel, and that was 90% of her success. And what people forget is she was a partner with Ronald Reagan, but she was also an inspiration to him. And you really have to think how much of the Reagan Revolution is owed to Margaret Thatcher. She came in a little bit before him. She already had her tussles with the unions before Reagan took on the air traffic controllers, and she was a real inspiration to him. And I think she's probably the most important single world figure to American conservatism.
In other words, people forget how important it is for a world leader to have another world leader to kind of bolster them, to stand up like they are,
right,
and give them extra support.
Right, and sometimes it was kind of very obvious, like saying to George H.W. Bush, don't go wobbly on us, George. But for Reagan, she was a real partner. And I think as much as the conservative movement in the United States, idolizes Ronald Reagan, they owe just as much to Margaret Thatcher.
Steve.
Well, she challenged the establishment within the Tory party. I mean, I think that's one of the real strengths, just as Ronald Reagan had challenged in 1976 the establishment of the Republican Party. I think that's a major part of her enduring legacy. I mean, she spoke with a clarity and a conviction that we just don't see in most politicians today and in most world leaders. And at a time when, sort of conventional wisdom here in Washington, but also elsewhere, places such value on compromise. It's such a virtue. She, I think, reminds us that it's not always good to compromise. In fact, it's often good not to compromise on behalf of your principles, to stand firm on the things that you believe in most. And one of the interesting things, as we see the Euro crisis playing out over Europe, to remember is that she fought that tooth and nail. And if you go back and look at her books, she was prophetic in predicting what would happen with the common currency. She said Germany's going to be left holding the bag and the poor countries are all going to need bailouts. I mean, she was very wise on all of those kinds of matters.
Here's what House Speaker John Boehner said today, Charles, in a statement. Margaret Thatcher, a grocer's daughter, stared down elites, union bosses, and communists to win 3 consecutive elections, establish conservative principles in Western Europe, and bring down the Iron Curtain. There was no secret to her values, hard work, and personal responsibility, and no nonsense at all in her leadership. I heard a number of people today say the Republican Party today needs a Margaret Thatcher.
Well, I think every country at every time could use somebody as principled and smart and strong as she is. I think what we don't quite remember in the gauzy recollections today is how despised she was, how widely despised at home and to some extent here among the left. I mean, she angered everybody in her country, from the communist union leaders to the upper class twits in her own party, which isn't easy to do. But she had tremendous strength and courage. When the Falklands were invaded, she immediately declared that she would go to war and undo it. She had no idea how. The Brits were totally unprepared, but she knew that it would take almost a month for the ships to arrive, so she'd have a month to actually work out how to do it. So they sent everything that was afloat out into the South Atlantic, and when they arrived, they had a plan, and they succeeded. But it was a dicey proposition at the beginning, and it was the moment that turned around her image at home and abroad.
All right, Margaret Thatcher, 87.